Right. Hello, everybody, and thanks again for tuning in to the Who Knew in the Moment podcast. Today, I'm super honored to have a good friend and a solid guy, Tyler Byrd, on today. Tyler Byrd is a very accomplished individual. He owns his own mental health practice. He also runs a coaching, mental health, and athletic coaching company himself. And additionally, some fun facts about Tyler. One of the best shooters that I've ever gotten the opportunity to play basketball with. I'm pretty sure he has his own statue in his hometown, or at least he should. So wink, wink, Bennington. And then recently, just because he's one of the most competitive humans that I've ever met, he had to go out and start this new journey of triathlon. So excited to maybe hear a little bit about how he prepares for those. So Tyler, thanks for being on, man.
Thanks, Phil. I've had the pleasure to listen to a couple of these interviews so far, and every guest has said the same thing. They're just going to use you as the hype man to introduce them anywhere they go. So I don't think they're building a statue anytime soon, but I appreciate the shout out because my wife still thinks she can beat me in a 3-point shooting competition, but we'll let future decide that.
I still got my money on you. I still have my money on Tyler. So, well, very good. So as you guys know, premise of the podcast is, hey, in life, there are these small moments that in the moment, you're not really sure the trajectory it's going to send you on. But as we grow and as we can look back, only in hindsight can we connect the dots and say that was one of those moments that ended up being a catalyst for something in the future. So Tyler, we got a long way to get through today, but I love to start with one, just because your knowledge base is so vast in the mental health side, but two, where it all began. So talk a little bit about, growing up, the family dynamic, and maybe some of the competitive and sports engaged things that you got from childhood.
Yeah, we've got a long way to go if we're going to go back to that. So I grew up with an older brother and a younger brother. So I'm the middle child, the peacekeeper, of course. Very athletic family, though. Both parents were collegiate athletes, actually both in the GPAC, so which is the conference I ended up playing in the future. So it was really awesome. We spent a lot of our weekends in gyms or playing some type of sporting activity. And I was really fortunate to be that middle child, I think, because I always had an older brother who could challenge me and make me play at a higher level. And then I had a younger brother that would help me build confidence because just by sheer age, I would have more success. So I think I hit that perfect threshold in the middle.
Yeah.
But I, at a really early age, developed a strong passion for basketball. I think the second I had one in my hand, I didn't stop dribbling it. Phil, we played college basketball together, and if there's a ball in my hand, I'm going to dribble, and I like it in my hands.
I was going to say you're going to shoot it. I don't know about dribble it.
Well, I'll shoot it too. And was really fortunate. I grew up in Omaha initially, and then moved to Bennington back when Bennington was really a small town, if you will. And just came in at exactly the right time when we were kind of booming as a society in Bennington and growing as a community, and just had the right people around me at the right time. So it helped me develop a lot more passion for the sport. And I've got a really fun story about probably where the competitive drive really comes from for me.
Yeah.
That I can get into if you'd like.
I'd love to hear it.
So at an early age, there was someone who saw me play basketball in a PAL basketball league. That's the Parochial Athletic League. And they said, has your son ever thought about playing competitive basketball or AAU basketball? And the AAU scene, you and I grew up in it, right? Like, it's blown up into what it is today. And my parents, I think, half lied and said, yeah, he's got some interest elsewhere. I don't know that I had any interest elsewhere. I think I was in like 5th grade. But started a competitive team, and that was right when I made the transition from Omaha to Bennington. So I come into this new school district. I'm meeting all kinds of new kids, and I've got this team that I play on. And so I don't know that I was an outsider. I made friends really easily, but I had this one coach who had me in baseball and had me in basketball. And for lack of a better way to put it, he should not have been coaching youth sports. I have 2 memories. First one was playing baseball, and we weren't playing well. And literally he left the dugout, went to the concession stand, ordered a hot dog, and was like belligerently screaming like, "Hey guys, hope you can handle this. You guys aren't playing well at all. You all suck. I'm gonna eat a hot dog." And like how no parents ever got into it with him, I don't know. So that was my first where I was like, do people really talk to kids like that?
Right.
Well, then fast forward a year later, we're playing in just a basketball league through Bennington. It's my first time on the team, and he got upset as a coach one day, and I literally will never forget the words he said, and they've carried with me throughout my life. He told everyone in the gym how they'll never amount to anything, they'll never be good enough, and he literally singled me out and said, Tyler, you might be mediocre, but you'll be mediocre at best. And so I think that's probably where the competitive, like literally my heart is beating super fast talking about this, because that's probably the first time the competitive drive of somebody telling me what I couldn't do, I took personal and decided the rest of my life, like no one's going to have that type of impact. And I think the parents I have, like I'm super blessed and fortunate that they never allowed me to take that approach or let anyone tell me what I was capable of. So I think from that point on, it was, if anybody told me what I couldn't do, I was going to try to prove you wrong in any way, shape, or form. And so I think that's really where the competitive drive started for me.
So let's talk about that a little bit. So I think the probably two questions I would have is, one, for you, fortunately, you had parents, or if someone had a support system that was able to kind of say, hey, don't listen to that.
Yep.
But two, if you don't have that, what are some things people can do to work through that? Right. I mean, because I would imagine most people have had someone tell them, hey, they're not good enough to do something. So if you don't have that support system, what can you be doing to work through that?
Yeah. I love that you use the term good enough. I think if I kind of bring and bridge the gap between like where I am now and where I was then, I think it'll always be a battle of what's good enough. And in my work as a mental health practitioner, a lot of my day is spent working with youth or adults on like, how do you define what's good enough for you? Because it's different for every person. A lot of people see what I've done and they're like, yeah, that's great. I can't believe you did that. Other people are like, I would never be good enough. And I think that's the first part of it, I think, is having a really good support system that you surround yourself with. So I'm fortunate I had that kind of inherently with family. So I was really blessed in that way. But I think people that don't have that, you can find that. I firmly believe like you get to decide who you spend your time with. So surrounding yourself with those people, like for instance, that coach, I chose not to play for his team again because
good choice.
I need people who are going to, help you grow and succeed. And in a lot of ways, I hold no resentment towards that person or anything. And people are like, well, how could you not resent that? He's got his own story about why that's the way he interacted with people. And it's not for me to judge his story. I'm sure he had a reason for doing it. So I think whether it's right or wrong, it doesn't matter to me. It matters how I determine what's good enough. And I think that's the biggest skill that I learned. If I could go back and study something, which I don't know if I want to go back to school, I think like an inherent resiliency trait is really, really interesting because you can take two people in the same situation, they'll respond really different. Why I responded differently, I don't know. I don't know if it's a just personality thing. I think that's part of it. I think it's an environment thing. And so I think really internal self-awareness is huge. I've always been somebody who looks introspectively on the mental and emotional side of how I function. And a lot of times our emotions aren't super rational. So if you can have the awareness of what your emotions are trying to get you to do or what you want, and then you can reason with logic, I think that allows you to really create a lot of good habits and I think just behaviors that lead to higher performance. And higher performance doesn't mean high achieving. It can mean just basic functioning for a lot of people. But I think to speak more directly to your direct first question, work ethic is so huge. And I took that voice and those words that he said, and I decided anytime I felt like work was hard or I didn't want to put in the effort, I remembered, I get to decide what determines my worth. And I just made a conscious effort to say, I'll decide what mediocre is, and I'm going to go above and beyond it. And not for his satisfaction. I've never had the desire to go back and show him my list of accomplishments. Like,
Yep.
that's not what drives me. It's the fact that I get to define what mediocre is, and I'm going to keep trying to find ways to be better than that.
Absolutely. Well, and I think a key word that you said in there is, you said it multiple times. Every time I wanted to like just highlight it, if I could highlight words, but it was decided,
Mhm.
right? That there is a decision there, right? Some people hear that comment and they decide to let that weigh on them and prevent them from getting to where they want to go. Other people decide to use it as a fuel to the fire.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating. I love to talk motivation versus discipline, because I think a lot of people have said I always have a high motivation for things. And sure, when I heard those words, there was no second guessing in my mind that I had an internal call. It came from within that I was like, all right, if this is how we're going to play it, like, I'll prove you wrong. Like,
Yeah.
so that's motivation. That's when it comes easy. But being a college athlete, regardless of what level you play, that's a full-time job. And
Yep.
there were plenty of days I was not motivated to do any of the work we did. That's where you have a decision, and that's where discipline really. I would preach discipline over motivation 10 times out of 10, because discipline will take you way further.
I 1,000% agree. I love that. The distinction between discipline, motivation. That's good. So we have this first experience, well, not first experience, but a very early on experience.
Yep.
I would imagine this is the catalyst to a phenomenal high school career and then the phenomenal collegiate career. Would you talk a little bit about when you decided, you know what, playing college athletics was something you wanted to do? And maybe that moment where you believed like, all right, it's going to happen.
Yeah. It's funny because I think this is another fascinating story about just like how life works out and understanding your emotional and mental health. And maybe me understanding it at an early age. Gift and a curse to have a mental health professional as a parent.
We'll get
But
to that.
yeah, I up until my freshman year of high school, I literally thought I was going to play for the North Carolina Tar Heels. I was like, I am good enough to do that. And like, again, like, God bless my parents for not crushing my hopes and dreams, because my freshman year of high school, I finally like realized what Division I basketball talent was like. And I was like, I just internally, I don't have that. I don't have the athleticism and the gifts that it takes to get to that level. So again, I had a decision to make. How important and how big of a passion was basketball? And for me, it was a no-brainer. Like, if I had free time, I was going to play basketball. In 7th grade, I convinced a substitute music teacher to let us go to the gym and play knockout, because that's what the music teacher did when we were done with music class. And
Love
I
it.
mean, I literally had stitches and a bandage on my hand. I couldn't play, but I got the whole gym to go, or the whole class to go to the gym. So basketball was always a passion. But I had a decision to make of what I wanted to do with my future in that realm. And I decided it didn't matter what level I played at, as long as basketball was a part of my life. And so I just made a decision to work as hard as I can and let the chips fall wherever they will. And I had my dad is fantastic at that. He said, if you're good enough, they'll find you.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to play on the AAU circuit, which my senior year I got to play against DeMar DeRozan in Las Vegas and in front of Roy Williams, who was literally the coach of North Carolina, and reminded me again why I'm not playing at North Carolina or never played there. But I got to have all these amazing experiences, and I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't trade it for the world, because when you get the opportunity to maximize your potential, and I really feel like physically I did as much as I could with the body I have. And I think I attribute a lot of that to my emotional capacity and mental capacity, of just understanding the game, of understanding my limits and my strengths, and really being able to play to that.
Yeah.
And so I think that's really how I turned all of that into, I guess, fuel to the fire. And when you have someone tell you you'll never be better than mediocre, I mean, 1% of high school athletes go and play in college. So if you look at the facts, like clearly that wasn't mediocre for me. And then I was able to make, get a lot of accolades for all conference teams, all state
Yes.
teams, all tournament teams. And I think a huge part of that wasn't because I was trying to prove him wrong or any of that. I think it was really just trying to prove myself right of where I thought I belonged. And I think if I can instill one thing in anyone listening, it's like, understand that you're good enough to do what it is you're willing to put your mind to. Like, I'm a big believer in you get out of life what you put into it.
That's
And
good.
I think I got out of basketball what I was willing to put into it. And could I have put in more? Maybe, I have no idea, but I'm comfortable with what I put into it and what I got from it.
I love that. Yeah, you're going to get out of it what you put into it. I think too many people want the end result without doing the necessary things. But the second thing I would say to it, and you mentioned the word resilient earlier, so I want to tie that into that statement, is I think oftentimes people experience a setback. I don't like the term failure, but a setback early on. And without that resilience, they're not willing to put in, the amount of effort needed to get the result they want. So what would you say to someone that, is maybe in that phase of life where they've had a setback or two, or, things haven't progressed as quickly as what, where they want it to be already? I mean, how can they build that muscle? I'll call resilience a muscle for some people.
I think there's the quote of, and I love quotes. So I'm going to drop 100 of them probably today.
Get your notes out.
Yeah. Like, I mean, my office is filled with quotes. But there's the quote out there, the belief out there that adversity builds character.
Yeah.
I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think setbacks build character, but I think adversity reveals character. And so I think if you're facing a setback, and look, the road was not pretty always for me. I mean, my freshman year, I played a lot early on in my freshman year, and literally no rhyme or reason, never got an explanation. I started playing less than a minute a game. At the end of the year, in the conference tournament, I literally will never forget. We were down early in a basketball game in the conference tournament, and head coach said, "Well, this one's over. Byrd, get in the game." Literally, like, it was 26-5. I have a memory that just knows all the stats and data. But we came back and we won that game.
Let's go.
And I had a great game, hit 6 threes in the game. Like and I think it was partly because, like, I didn't subscribe to a lot of the noise. And I think resiliency is really focusing on what you can control, which is very, very small in the scheme of life. And we live in a society that is so hyper focused on things outside of our control. And look, it's easy and even understandable to get bitter when you face a setback to things that aren't fair.
Yep.
I tell people you have a choice in life. You can get bitter or you can get better. And I won't blame you for getting bitter. When you've had grief and trauma and loss, like, you're justified to be bitter about that. The issue is, though, you can also choose to get better. That's where that decision comes back. And I guess I've been fortunate to always approach things with a decision to try to get better. I think it's the only way to live life to the fullest. But it's not the easy way to live. It's easy to be bitter. And I still fall victim. I'm bitter all the time about things. I'm just lucky that my support system can look at me and be like, "Tyler, bitter or better, it's your choice."
Yeah. But I think that's huge. And to even like add a little caveat to the phrase that you use your bitterness to get better, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't either bitter or better. It's like, well, I am kind of bitter about the comment, but I'm going to use it now to get better. I'm starting to notice a theme here, Tyler. I just got to make these little jab comments in your side, and then we'll get better, Tyler.
Bitter than better. I'm along for the ride.
I love it, man. I love it. So as you're going through your collegiate career, I think there's a lot of just life lessons that can be learned from athletics, regardless of the level at which you played. But any big, life lessons that you think stand out from your athletic career, up to this point in your life?
Yeah. Let me think on it for a second. There's so many that come to mind. I'm going to go this route with it.
Yeah.
I think we have a gross overemphasis on athletics in society. And look, like ball is life. I subscribe to that model. Until I was 22 years old, I think, like ball is life. That's what I love to do. And like, I loved football as well, but like basketball was life for me. I think the biggest thing I learned though, and what I have a passion for talking to athletes about today is I actually love, I can't remember what commercial it is or who the brand is. Maybe it's Enterprise, like you're bound to go pro in life, but it's going to be in something. I'm going to butcher the quote, but it's such a genius marketing tool because most of us will go pro in things other than athletics, but the foundation that athletics give you on how to handle success and failure or defeat, how to understand work ethic, how to do things you don't like to do, and probably more importantly, how to communicate with others. And the top one, how to contribute to something greater than yourself. I think that's really the things that I take in my professional roles now is like, I owe the most gratitude towards all of my career in athletics, whether I was successful or not, in the foundation it gave me for how to interact with people and how to understand mental and emotional health, because we don't spend enough time teaching kids the mental and emotional like aspect of life in general, let alone the mental and emotional aspect of athletics. No one taught me that other than my parents. Really, I was fortunate again to have parents who did that, and at times unfortunate because I overanalyze everything. But I think really that's the foundational part of athletics for me, is just how to be a part of something bigger than myself. The we is greater than me. And then two, just really how to communicate with others. And I've always been in a role where quarterback, point guard, like they require a lot of communication. So I was really fortunate to learn a lot of good communication skills.
Yeah. Well, and so you hit on something that I want to make sure we talk about, and that is, you're a leader as a person. So, I mean, something I didn't mention, but I mean, Tyler's, president of a board for cystic fibrosis, right? I mean, he's just viewed as somebody that, whether it was in athletics or in a community that people, looked up to or wanted to emulate. So thinking about that for you, where do you think the leadership part of it comes from? I mean, you were the middle child, so you're more of the peacemaker than maybe the leader. Maybe you instigated some things for your younger brother, but talk a little bit about where leadership comes from and, where that plays a role in your life today.
Gosh, it's funny. I spoke to a group of high school students a few years back, and my high school football coach, like one of the greatest coaches, greatest mentors I ever had. And he had me come back and speak to his team. And he just said, I don't think leaders are born. I think they develop skills and they develop abilities to become a leader. And he said, Tyler's as close to a natural born leader as I've ever met. He's always kind of had that. I think where it comes from for me is probably just, I think in my childhood, having some of those experiences that were difficult and being told things or having things happen that were outside of my control that I didn't like, and just having that internal drive to not settle for that and know that there can be more and better, and there's got to be a better way. I think just created an intensity in me that I want to make sure others have access to that too. And I think that's why I always ended up in leadership roles. Was I have a natural like inclination to like competition, to like achievement. And so I always said yes to any of those competitions. And maybe that's being one of three boys. And then I had three sisters in foster care. We adopted 2 sisters. So I think just always being in like around a lot of people, someone's going to have a voice. And if you talk to any of my close friends, I'll voice I have a loud voice. I'm not afraid to use it. So I think it's maybe a little bit environment with that.
I love it. I love that, man. That's good. So as we're wrapping up college, we then go get our master's so we can work into the mental health practitioner side of things. Now, one thing I want to ask at this point is, So you alluded to it earlier, having a parent that's, in this field, it's a blessing and a curse. So your mom's in the
Yep.
mental health practice. At what point did you decide this is the route that I want to go? And, what did that conversation with her look like, as you inquired about as a career or a vocation?
You're going to love this answer. Phil, I literally tried to be anything but a therapist. I like everyone asked me like, when did you realize like you wanted to be a therapist? Like, when was your calling? And I was like, never. I did not want to be a therapist. I tried to be anything but a therapist. Eventually, though, I think it's twofold. One, after high school, I looked in the mirror and I was like, dude, you're sensitive. It's okay. Get over it. Like, accept it, embrace it. And it allowed me to be more authentic in who I was.
Yeah.
But secondly, that meant admitting that I'm a therapist. Like, that's who I am. That's my DNA. That's my personality. And then I think really my experience with athletics led me to that field, because I'm so fascinated by human interaction. I'm so fascinated by interpersonal communication, and I'm so fascinated by why people do what they do and what brings them joy and what brings them purpose. There's like 10,000 books with the word happy in the title. It's the self-help is the most read section in a library. Like, there's a reason for all those things. And I've always been, I think, acutely aware of what other people are thinking and feeling and trying to understand that better. And so instead of fighting it, why not join it?
Yeah.
And I'm a lot like my mom in the sense that she's got a huge passion for helping people. And so that's really when I was like, all right, Tyler, you're going to be a therapist. Like, that's your calling. But I'm really, really fascinated by also the mental health versus mental illness side of things. And therapy is great at addressing mental illness and addressing mental health in a very reactive way. I'm really interested in proactive ways. And I think that's maybe part of the other reason I've been able to have a lot of success in a lot of areas of life is my parents always instilled proactive measures. So I have a strong calling to help other people find what their proactive means to building a bigger and better life.
That's great. So you said a word in there and you didn't elaborate on it too much, but you strategically have already mentioned it. So now we have to talk about it. That the word happy is in 10,000 different book titles. So I want to talk about a difference that I'm a firm believer in. And it's the difference between happiness and joyful. Okay. So my firm belief is this: happiness is a feeling that is garnished from something happening to me or for me, whatever it is, but it's temporary. Joy or joyfulness is more of like a decision and a mindset. Would love to hear your opinion either on that or completely debunk my mental mindset, but that's the way I view those things.
Yeah, so I would have to I'd have to dive into like joy and joyful. Like, literally, I will look it up in Merriam-Webster. It's my favorite app. I don't care how nerdy that sounds. I love root word. I love to simplify and break things down. As far as the happiness side, a lot, and I'll build on kind of joy and kind of give another word that I use a lot with individuals. Happy, I think, is such a false idol for us. Like, if I want to be happy, I'll think of my favorite food, eat it, and I'll be happy in that moment. But feelings are going to come and go, right?
Absolutely.
Like, happiness in relationships, everything new is always like happy and there's a flood of emotion. But I preach a lot fulfillment. And fulfillment comes from, it comes from hard work. It comes from dedication. It comes from overcoming setbacks. But you can't take fulfillment away.
Right.
Literally everything I've been able to overcome in my own personal journey. And if anyone listening to this thinks about a setback that they overcame and worked through, I guarantee you the feeling in their body right now is fulfillment. And that's probably much akin to what you're talking about with joy. Joy is a mindset that I'm recognizing the reality of the situation, and I'm choosing to be joyful about the things that, it's right in line with gratitude, and the research is growing on gratitude and mindfulness and being present. It's the reason why I think we're in a society right now that has so much anxiety, so much depression, so much confusion, is we have so many things that can fill our mind. And I mean, the quote, if it bleeds, it reads, and negative press gets more attention. Like, negative, you'll remember your 10 worst events in life before your single best.
Bingo.
But a fascinating spin on all of that is, if you talk to someone and hear their life story, the moments in their life that become, and you're hearing it from me today, that become your like favorite moments to share are actually the negative moments that you've overcome. So your favorite part of the story, like literally a coach telling me that I'll never be better than mediocre, has became the favorite like moment of my life story because I was able to overcome it and do something about it. So had I not overcome that, we wouldn't be talking about it today, because I
Right.
wouldn't want to tell that story. I'd want to
Yeah.
hide it. But I think that's the difference between happiness and joy and fulfillment and gratitude versus feeling a victim. I just think we preach happiness so much to people, though, because it's so instantaneous, and we can get it so much faster. And you know as well as I do, like, life really doesn't work that way. And we all know that up here in our brains, but we're driven a lot more by emotion than anyone wants to believe.
Absolutely. So, a point you made, and I want to ask about this next transition in your life, and then I'm going to segue. We're just going to talk about it now. So, you made the comment about fulfillment, okay? And the thing that was
Mhm.
interesting that was running through my head is so many people want to be happy all the time, but the reality is to get true fulfillment, you're climbing the mountain and there's setbacks, right? And I mean, that's what gives you that feeling of fulfillment. If
Mhm.
I don't know that I've ever had something that's been super meaningful to me that was just easy the entirety of the way, and then I accomplished it. Pretty much everything that stands out as meaningful, to your point, has had setbacks, and so I think that's just an important thing to remember: is hey, you're in the process of becoming fulfilled, right?
Mhm.
If you're in that dark phase or if you're in that tough season, you're like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna get through this. Keep going, because when you do, it's going to be one of those hindsight moments of like, yes.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, the thing coming to my mind while you say that is, like, you look at your own life, right? And it is so easy for us to talk about how hard our life has been, and that's accurate. Like, everyone's personal narrative is so important, and
Yeah.
if you don't address childhood issues, childhood trauma, your adult relationships, your adult mindset will. You won't have a choice. You can't run from it. Like, at the end of the day, we're all just big kids in
Yeah.
adult bodies. Like, we carry that stuff with us. And what I was thinking about is how easy it is for us to look at somebody else and attribute their success to, well, they had it easier. They've always been happy. They've never had to deal with what we have. And look, whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. That's a safety mechanism for us basically overtly telling ourselves we're not good enough. And
Mm,
that's why I think addressing that self concept of being good enough and believing we're good enough, then you're willing to get through all the tough stuff to reach that fulfillment.
that's great, man. That's great. So, as you graduate, you're now entering into professional life as we know it, and you're licensed mental health practitioner, and you're wanting to start your own company. While you're getting it started, though, you also have a full-time job. Would you
Yep.
talk a little bit about that? Because this is going to speak to the entrepreneurs in the group. Not everyone that listens is a business owner, but this might either spark someone that's working a full-time job to start a business, or reassure someone that's running their own business, hey, you might be in the right industry. So I'd love to hear a little bit about starting the company while working the full-time job.
Yeah. So I'll add one more thing. So I was finishing my graduate degree all night program through UNO, getting my master's in counseling. I'm working full time to help pay bills, make sure I have enough in the bank account. I decide that a buddy, I worked at a running store at the time, great hours, flexible hours, commission based, loved it. I love sales. And literally have a buddy that's like, hey, you want to do a triathlon? I told him no like 4 times. And then he sent me a picture of a bike. I bought it, did it. And so I'm training for a triathlon. I'm working full time at the running store. I'm starting a private practice in mental health. And luckily, I was able to go straight into private practice because my mom was in private practice, had her own business. And I said, hey, you got any office space? And she said, yeah, you can take another office. So I'm able to start a private practice. And I don't know if it's just I'm naive and dumb and decide not to think how terrible this could go, or probably as my wife would tell you, there's some thrill in me that's like, let's see if it all just goes to zero and I fail and everything and see what happens when I hit rock bottom. So maybe it's just the blind faith that I'll do whatever it takes to make it work, or I'm not that scared of it all crumbling down. I don't really know. But I just decided to start a private practice straight out. And as that built up and I built more clientele, working with individuals on a regular basis, I was able to go part-time at the running store. And then when I felt like finances were good enough and I was able to work more full-time capacity, I was able to get rid of the running store. And then once I got full licensure, I was able to really kind of hit the ground sprinting from that. Because one of the tricky parts when you get a master's in counseling, you have to accrue 3,000 hours of practice before you can get fully licensed. And during that provisional time, your rates are reduced. You're not as expensive, which is great for you because you'll get more clients, great for clients because insurance drives everything in the mental health world. So it was a win-win, but it's a lot of hours. And then I decided I think because of my athletic background, I was like, I got to find something else to do athletically to create competition. And really, triathlon it's my mental health coping strategy. I won't call it therapy because therapy is literally like, it's a trained, like licensed degree to become a therapist, but it is a therapeutic coping strategy. So really triathlon has been great for me for just my own mental health and own mental well-being.
So there's a lot in that. Let's start with the triathlon part, just because you're still doing that today and you're darn good at it. The competitive side makes complete sense, right? I mean, you've always been in athletics. What about that for you is a healthy release, right? I mean, why is that something that for you, it just allows you to work through things or, just be a positive in your life?
The interesting thing is you would think, based on my background and playing team sports and basketball, you're always trying to win a game. You're always trying to win a championship. You're always trying to get to the next level with that. But triathlon's really different. Like, everyone thinks I'm lying when I say, like, end result for me, if I get a podium or I win a race, like, sure, I want to win a race. When I'm on the race, like in the race, I want to win. But I literally do not care about where I place. I care about, like, did I better myself, my time? Did I learn something about myself mentally, emotionally during that race? For me, it's the interpersonal journey that I'm on with it, which can sound a little bit more like, oh yeah, cliche, everyone, it's all about the journey, but like it literally is. It's all we have in life. Like, literally your journey is all you have. Like, the destiny, it's not a finite agreed upon set of rules in life, other than, like, you're going to be born, you're going to die. Everything else there's no agreed upon terms. So you get to choose your journey. And I think what triathlon does for me, it allows me to assess myself, one, physically, because I did my thesis on engagement and physical activity and its relationship with anxiety. And I mean, like, the research and evidence is huge. Like, physical activity helps reduce anxiety and depression. So movement is really important. I get that from it. But I actually am more fascinated with the mental and emotional side. Like, you're out there, you're training early in the morning, you're running after you've already swam and biked, like, you're going to find out what the demons in your head say. Like, and they're going to come full force, and they're not going to be nice. And everything, like, I've had people tell me all kinds of hurtful things. I started this podcast with that. They can't say even close to what I'll say to myself when I want to make myself quit. So to challenge that side of yourself and be able to overcome that, like, that doesn't just help you from a athletic standpoint. That's a business standpoint. That's a relationship standpoint. That's literally all walks of life for you. So, and then from that emotional side, just learning how irrational your emotions are and how fast we are willing to shut ourselves down when things get uncomfortable. I think it's really my way to stay on the journey and stay on the process, and make sure that I practice what I preach every day with youth and teens.
I love that. So one thing I want to, I guess, kind of expand upon that you mentioned in there is the comparison piece. Okay.
Mhm.
Because I want to say this: comparing yourself to others is a tough road, right? It leads to a lot of unfulfillment.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think something that can be healthy, though, is comparing yourself to past you, comparing yourself to where you want to be because of where you want to be. So maybe elaborate a little bit on that, because once again, comparison to others, I mean, it steals a lot of joy. It's going to lead to a lot of unfulfillment. But being better than previous Tyler, I mean, that's a healthy thing.
Yeah. I love this topic because I think I preach it a lot, and I've had to learn it the hard way for myself, right? Like, there's a time and a place for comparison with others. I think there are some finite situations where you're a job applicant. You can compare yourself to others and grow either way. That's maybe the other thing with this. Kind of what you're speaking to is a growth mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's being able to take feedback on yourself and use it to grow and improve. And I've always had that mindset too. But I think comparison to yourself, that's the only game that's worth playing.
Yep.
If you're making yourself better, if you're using your outside world to give you feedback on yourself and genuinely assessing, what are my thoughts, what are my feelings, what are my actions, and then realizing all I control are my actions, then you can determine what is good enough. And I know I come back to that good enough saying a lot, but it's so vital to human behavior and human performance and just self-esteem. And if we're talking like true, like, self-actualization and true fulfillment in life, the only way to get there is through high self-esteem and feeling like you provide something to the world and give some of yourself back to the world. So I think comparison with yourself is really about understanding that it's an audience of one. And that's probably the hardest part with athletics is you don't get preached an audience of one. You get preached team. You need to do it for your team. You're preached that you got to do it for your coach or your parents or the crowd. You only have to do it for yourself. And I think if we understood that more, then you can determine what's good enough. Then you can work towards what's good enough. And then good enough is going to become higher and higher the more you do that.
I love it. And, one thing that I'd just say for me personally is, working in the industry that I do, where you're constantly compared to others, being in athletics where you're literally compared to everyone else because you the comparison because you either played or you didn't play. But when you get the confidence from saying, hey, I did everything I could do to put myself in the position, now I'm unattached from the end result of what happens that's outside of my control. I think that's where where confidence for a lot of people can come from. It's like, I have no regrets. Like I put everything into this that I can. And the fact that Tyler got the start above me doesn't make me feel any worse about myself because I did everything I could and the end result was out of my control anyway. I think for too many people, they don't take that. They just focus on the end result. And it's like, well, only feel bad about the end result if you didn't do everything you could have to put yourself in that position, right?
Well, and Phil, that's such a hard skill for people to learn because what we're taught day in and day out is, yeah, well, the coach had it out for you. Or, yeah, well, Tyler bribed the coach, or Tyler's coach's favorite. Tyler, I mean, and you can go down the line, and you
Right.
see it with parents calling coaches, and you see, I mean, the environment we live in now is that there's always got to be an excuse and a reason. And like sometimes the reason is like just out of my control. And like I did the best I can. And like you and I have talked about this before, like there's 4 other teams that would there wouldn't have been another person there that would have taken the spot. Or
Yep.
there's a million other probably advisors who have met with clients of yours that had they not met you, they'd be working with them, but they already met you and like you. And it's nothing that it was outside of that advisor's control. And so I tell people a lot of times too in therapy, there are some people that I meet one time.
Yep.
And when I first started my career, I took that very personal. And I was like, gosh, am I not a good therapist? And what I realized is like, I can't be the best fit for everyone. There's over 7 billion people in this world. Like to
Yeah.
think that I am the best therapist for everyone is pretty conceited and
Mm.
pretty self-serving. But I realized that like in order to like be the best version of yourself, you have to let go of all those things outside of your control. And that's, don't get me wrong, that is a daily struggle still. I
Yeah.
multiple times I have trouble with things outside my control and try to make them in my control. But the awareness to say I'm doing the best I can and I can rest on that is invaluable for people.
I love that. That's awesome, man. That's worth rewinding a couple seconds. Hey, it's conceited of me to think I'm the best for everyone, right? You just have those
Mhm.
niche markets or those niche people that you are the best for, and it's not your job to make sure everyone sees you as the best fit. So I love that. That's good.
Yeah.
Now, as we progress, right? So we're done with the running company. We built our business up to be successful enough where that can sustain you. Talk about the progression of the business, right? I mean, starting a business
Mhm.
is hard. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, but it is hard. So talk a little bit about just the growth of the business, and then how it's progressed since then.
Yeah. Gosh, I wish we could have done this interview in March when I actually started. So starting a business is hard. Starting a business when there's a worldwide pandemic is like nothing I could have predicted. So
Yeah,
we opened we opened Complete Wellness March 1st of last year. A pandemic was announced, I think March 16th of last year.
sounds about
Um,
right.
so literally nothing we can predict. One silver lining again, like I'm not a believer. I mean, I know the like phrase everything happens for a reason and all of that, but like I'm gonna tell you right now, there is a bit of luck in everything. And
Mm,
like there are things outside our control. Maybe that's where faith life comes from a little bit for me, but we were really fortunate that look, mental health is really, really important right now, and it's been at the forefront. And so when you start a mental health practice and you expand and grow during a pandemic, when people really need somebody to listen to them and understanding and someone to help them realize what's in their control and what's out of their control and hear depression and hear anxiety, and you're trained in that. In a weird way, it was a perfect time for us to open and expand. But a little bit on the expansion story.
yeah.
I'm sure my mom will listen to this and she'll get emotional when she does. And I might even get emotional talking about it, but I'm a therapist, so it's bound to. Complete Wellness, when I sat down to start that, my first paper in Intro to Counseling as a master's student was all about this comprehensive model. It was mind, body, spirit. It was integrating different providers and practitioners to try to give people the most access to care.
Yeah.
And so I watched my mom, and like I'm biased, I get it, I'm her son, but like you can ask the community in the city we live in, like she's hands down the best therapist in the community. She is heart of gold, like knows how to work with kids, knows how to build rapport, and like just doesn't have an off switch. Like she doesn't get tired, she doesn't get burnt out. I don't know how. Like she's better than I am. Like I'm not afraid to admit that. But I watched her as I was growing up through sports and athletics constantly provide care to people and always answer the phone when people needed help, and maybe at times even had like answer too much and give too much of herself. And
Yeah.
Then I got into the mental health field, and private practice is what everyone wants to do. And I realized like I wanted something that my mom could be a part of as well, that we could build and expand, because she laid the foundation. She had the name. People know me because of my last name, because she has a reputation. But really, it was about creating a group of providers that really have a mission to give back to the community, and not just provide mental health treatment, but really help people know that, like, to be completely well, you have to take care of a lot of different parts of yourself. And
Right.
some of that is your mental health, some of that is your physical health, some of that is your emotional health, nutritional health. So our plans are to build and grow that out. But really, what I wanted was a place that we could expand and be a collaborative team, because I could have stayed private practice on my own, gone fast, been fine, coasted 20 years into retirement, 30 years, 40 years, however long, and been totally fine. But
Yeah.
I think athletics taught me, like, if you want to go far, you have to go together. And the only way to do that is to have a team approach where you have people learning from each other constantly. And I know the phrase "school's never out for the pro." Like, I literally learn new things every single day. That's why I was super pumped to be on the podcast. Is I'm gonna learn as much from this interview with you asking me questions as anyone's gonna learn from me. So
Yeah.
that's really what I think the building out the model is. It's about being able to go further and impact more people. I can impact a finite amount of people in a week. There's only so many hours.
Yeah.
Or I can build a group practice of a lot of really great providers and impact an exponentially more amount of people. So
Yeah.
I get super fired up talking about that, obviously.
I love it. So, well, one thing I want to talk about, I mean, because we hit on it earlier. Having a mom, that was in this realm, obviously, has impacted you the entirety of your life.
Mhm.
What is it that you maybe saw from her, when she maybe talked about her job, or the way she interacted with people, or the way people perceived her, that sticks out to you? That was maybe a little motivation, and like, yeah, this would be a fun career path.
I think it's more literally every game I played in college, you could trust my parents to be there.
Yeah.
You and I have joked about it at times, like alumni basketball. It's where's the Birds? Like, they're going to show up to the game.
Yeah.
And even more than that, though, I'm a huge words of affirmation person. And from a young age, my mom recognized that really early. And she said, Tyler needs words of affirmation. So literally, every game I played in high school, football or basketball, I would get a card on game day. Like,
That's awesome.
who thinks to have time to like sit and write a card? Like, I don't think she ever missed a game.
Yeah.
Writing down the card, which, I mean, I could dive into my mom's story, I'm sure, and it's probably because her parents didn't provide that. So you learn from that and you provide that to your kids. And I think I recognized a lot of myself. I recognized my mom's characteristics. I recognized it in me. And so I think I've always been pretty good with words because of her interaction with me. And I think I just eventually realized that was the realization for me, was like, I always viewed sensitive as this like weak male characteristic. And
Yeah.
like, if I'm a sensitive male and an athlete and a jock, like, what, those don't fit, right? They butt heads. Like, you're supposed to be strong and like be the popular kid and not cry and not be weak. But what I realized is how strong it is to be emotionally vulnerable. I realized that my teammates responded really well when I asked how they were doing and sat and listened to them when they were struggling. Or I'll never forget in football, I before a state playoff game, one of our teammates had lost his grandpa, and we took a moment of silence. It's the best game that kid ever played, and
Yeah.
it wasn't because I did any like macho thing. It was because like I met him where he was emotionally and gave him a space to feel what he needed to feel around a team that made him feel better. And I think that's really what eventually I recognized. Sensitivity is not this weak character. It's a huge strength. And it really allows me to interact with people in a way that others don't often get to.
I love it, man. That's good. That's good. So additionally, then, right, in your mental health practice, a lot of it is we're trying to correct things that maybe haven't been going
Mhm.
well. So another aspect of you, which is what you've really talked about in the sports side, is the kind of the opposite side of that, right? How do I take good and get it to better? And so then
Mhm.
we build think, shrink, performance. Talk
Yep.
a little bit about that and just the coaching. And I know it's a work in progress, but it's always growing.
Yeah, I should have thought of a better think shrink performance coaching. I trip over it myself all the time. So like I fully relate, and I'm glad you did that. Part of me thinks it was semi-planned because you know me.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but one of the huge parts with I love what I do as a therapist. I really do. But a lot of therapy is I'm meeting with people after something has happened. And like, I don't know that I'll ever want to stop working in that capacity. I love meeting people where they are. And really, to what your point that you said earlier, I'm helping them rewrite their narrative
Yeah.
in a way that fits their future better,
Yeah.
and allows them to succeed in the future. But one of the things that you're seeing it at all levels of sports right now, like go to a youth basketball, baseball tournament and watch the outpouring of emotion and watch how much of these kids' self-esteem is either boosted or in the other ways just totally shrunk down and totally like debilitating for these kids. And really, I tell parents all the time, like I could go sit at a baseball like tournament and hand my business card out right and left to not just the kids but the parents, because
Right.
and it's not the parents' fault. Like nobody talked to them about the emotional side of games unless they had parents. Like school is getting better at it, but you don't take a class on emotion regulation. You don't
Yep.
take a class on communication strategies, on how to handle when things don't go your way. You're told to get your homework done and handle everything outside of life, or outside in personal life. And so think shrink performance coaching, really what I wanted to do was help people understand we all train the physical side.
Yep.
Like you and I spent countless hours on physical skills.
Yep.
Very few people train the mental or emotional side. And
Mm.
I use this analogy with a lot of people, and I say imagine a triangle, and 0 to 10 is your number on physical, mental, and emotional. Well, physically, most of us physically have the ability to do whatever we set out to do. That's that good enough, right?
Yep.
So most of us would be a 10 on that. But if I'm a 5 mentally and a 4 emotionally, that shrinks my actual ability level, and all that rest is potential. And
Yeah.
look, a 5 and a 4 on mental and emotional might be really good for you. But can you imagine if you could hit a 9 or a 10 on those things? Like your potential and your ability goes through the roof. But in order to do that, you've got to understand what mentally and emotionally you're doing. And we don't address those things always. And I think we're getting better at a society or as a society at doing that. But that's really what Think Shrink Performance was designed for, was to help people understand like what are the mental and emotional narratives that are standing in my way.
I love it, man. That's good. So I have a couple pointed questions I like to end with.
Yep. Love
So
it.
pointed question number one is something that we have discussed before, so you have a little bit of a cheat sheet here, but I still will love your input. And that is the idea of blissful dissatisfaction, right? So
Yeah.
anyone that's listening for a first time, this was something that was explained to me years ago and has just been a very focal point in my life. And it's the idea a lot of people hit their first goal, and so they really peak out. They never go above and beyond that because they hit their goal, so they're plateaued. On the other hand, you get the kind of the opposite end of the spectrum, and that is the person that hits the goal and then realizes, well, I can do more, and so they're constantly trying to get to the next goal, and they never take time to look back at everything they've accomplished and find fulfillment, right? A term we've used today
Mhm.
in that. And so, Tyler, for you personally, how do you balance that, right? Like you've hit goals, yet you aspire to do so much more. How do you take time to enjoy that and actually find fulfillment there?
Yeah. Work in progress.
Yeah,
It's
we
funny.
all are. We all are.
You asked that question, and literally like the year just ended. We're heading into 2021. I'm doing year-end reviews with some of my colleagues and some of the other therapists. And one of them looks at me and said, Tyler, have you like sat back and realized like how amazing what you've done is? And I literally was like, what are you talking about? How amazing what we've done. We haven't done this. We haven't done this. We haven't done this. And I think that speaks to that like dissatisfaction side of me, that like, and that as much as a gift is using that bitterness of you'll never be better than mediocre, as much as that can be a gift, right? We have to temper that to make sure it doesn't become a curse. And I think surrounding myself with people who can literally look at me and be like, I'm a words of affirmation person, and say, Tyler, what you're doing is really, really cool and really, really great. And that might sound like, oh, you need so much validation. Well, we all do. Like everybody is looking for validation. If you watch parents interact with kids, all of their struggle is that the kid hasn't feel validated from the parent. And if you find a parent who validates the kid's behavior will change. They don't like feeling the way they do. Yeah. And so I think for me, like how I balance that is I consciously have to take a step back, or I have a support system that validates it and tells me like, Tyler, it's okay to step back and say, what you've done so far is awesome. And like what you've done so far is good enough. And you can be content with good enough and want more. And I think that's a lesson I've learned throughout life is I'm always going to want more. Like, I don't know that I can change my brain or shut it off. And like, I don't know that I want to either, but I think maybe triathlon has taught me that a lot of, there's always going to be another level. You're always going to find somebody better than you. So it's okay to be happy with where you are and still want to improve. But look, the reality of life is we're all going to age. We're all going to get older. And the things we used to be able to do physically are going to change. But the things we do mentally and emotionally, they're also going to change. Like my mental capacity at some point down the road isn't going to be as strong as it is now. But if you reset and I'm huge on mindfulness and get back in the present, you can reset a goal that allows you to get better than you were today. And I don't know what that looks like 10, 15, 20 years from now, but I'm sure when we sit down to do the next podcast in 5, 10, 15, 20 years, we'll be able to look back on this and say, I'm either practicing what I preach or man, I should revisit some of those.
I love it. Well, the whole last tidbit you gave, we could do an entire hour podcast. So I'm just going to make you promise that we do another one in the next probably a few months, and we'll dive deeper on that. Okay.
Man, I'm 100% in.
I love it. Then the last point of question I have today is people have their circle, right? And just knowing you know a lot of people. You're a very well-connected person, but you also have what I would call a pretty close inner circle. What is, or what are the one or two traits that are just quintessential to Tyler for someone to get into that circle?
That's a great question. I'm thinking, literally I'm looking up in my head right now, thinking of the people in my circle. The first one that jumps out to me, authenticity. I think one of the biggest things, and I know that can be kind of a cliche term, but the people around me, they're authentic. I know who they are. And maybe it's a little bit honesty with me, but it's deeper than honesty. It's when I talk to them, I know I'm going to get who they are, and I know I'm going to get who they want to be. And look, who they are isn't always maybe who they want to be, but I have free reign and they have free reign to look at me and say, that isn't you. Like, that's not you. I think the one huge one is authenticity. And I think the other one that I would say, philosophical is maybe the other one that I think all those people have in common. They're people that I can talk about deep, meaningful, philosophical. It's probably more connection. They're people that I can connect with on a deeper level than the surface, that I don't care what your job is. I don't care what your hobbies are. I can literally be interested in anything. If you have passion and you have a deep purpose for why you do something, like I can sit up all night and talk about that and like not feel tired the next day. So
Yeah.
I would say it's probably those two things. It's authenticity and connection.
I love it. Well, very good. Well, my man, I absolutely appreciate you hopping on today. There's so many good nuggets. Man, the one thing I'm going to say is I don't know if anyone's ever told you that you're not going to be a great therapist or not, but I'm just going to say it right now. So that way you'll be running the world of therapy, right? Just hold on to that little nugget. No, but
I love it.
seriously,
I love it.
yeah, I appreciate it. And, for anyone listening, there's so many good takeaways from this, whether it's applying it to being a parent, being a friend, being a leader, a mentor in your business. Think about, different ways to help folks that maybe haven't had the best upbringing to this point and how you can be a positive influence. Think about, raising your kids and how you can give them words of affirmation, or you can provide a different experience than maybe what you had from a parenting standpoint, if that isn't how you would like to have your kids raised. Oftentimes we do the way we've been taught, and if you didn't like that, have the opportunity to change it. So Tyler, thanks again for being on, my man, and we'll look forward to doing this again soon.
I love it, Phil. Thanks for having me.